there you go. You're coming
there.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Sorry about that. I just had to refresh.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Jennifer Grossman, the Coordinator of Research and Evaluation for the Higher Education Policy Commission. And thank you for joining us for our session addressing basic needs and security among college students. I'd like to invite you to add your questions throughout this presentation to the session chat box just at the right of your screen, which now I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And we will address any questions that come in at the end of the presentation. And now I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Sarah Beasley, who is the Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Concord University. And prior to her current role at Concord, Dr. Beasley served as Director of Statewide Academic Initiatives at the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission and held multiple positions in student access at Harvard University. Dr. Beasley has a PhD from Boston College and a Master's of Education and Bachelor of Arts degrees from Harvard University. We're very excited to have Dr. Beasley here today to share her expertise. And with that, I turn it over to her.
Great, thank you so much. And I am going to start my slide presentation. And when I do that, for some reason, I'm unable to see folks. So let me know when I started if you can see. Right now, I'm seeing like mirror after mirror of my screen. So hopefully this works, and I apologize for the technical issues. Are you all able to see my slides now? I hope. Can someone give me a
yes, we can see
thank
everything.
you. Okay. Well, thanks again. Again, my name is Sarah Beasley. I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Concord University. And during this session, we'll discuss why we need to focus on basic needs in order to help our students be successful. And I was pleased to hear the morning presentation from Chancellor Tucker and the focus on keeping students front and center. So we'll look at some of the research on college students and basic needs and security, and we'll discuss ways to assess and address them. So if you have a question, again, I apologize. I'm still having some technical difficulties, so I can't see the chat or anything but my slides. But I hope there will be an opportunity to answer questions and have some discussion as well.
So Dr. Beasley, this is Jennifer. I'll be happy to read the comments and the questions as they come in, and I'll pop on screen at the conclusion so we can get to those Q&A.
Okay, and I'll stop sharing my screen and then I'll be able to see folks again. So why does it matter? There's a lot of reasons why it matters. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this pyramid here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think all of us in higher education, we want to see our students, our goal really is to see them get to the top of the pyramid. But that's really difficult to do if they are worried about where their next meal is coming from, where they're going to be sleeping at night. And I know we're seeing more and more of that at Concord and other college campuses across the nation. So it also matters. I mean, we're all interested in improving retention and graduation rates. And in order to do that, I think we need to ensure that students, their financial and basic needs are met. And finally, it's just the right thing to do as well. Let's see. So I'm not sure if anyone has had the opportunity to see this documentary called Hungry to Learn, but I thought I would just share the preview of it with you because it's what we're seeing on campuses, and you'll see some real students and some of the things they're dealing with. So I'll show that quickly. I hope this works.
Some people are coming here and they're not even making ends meet. They can barely afford the tuition.
I don't have a meal plan, so I can't eat on campus unless I'm going out of pocket.
They started making fun of the fact that I was homeless. From then, I didn't want to tell anyone. I'm not just the only one that has to use the resource that we have on campus because it's hard. It definitely is hard.
I got an email the other day. Basically, this is how much money you owe now. Is it worth it?
This is a systemic problem, and it's bigger than any one of us. Every time I give a public lecture, a student comes up to me afterwards and says, I didn't know you knew. I'm going to be paying back loans for the rest of my life. You got to spend this much money to eat.
There are definitely moments of panic when it's about 4 o'clock and you realize I haven't eaten anything all day.
The federal government and the folks all the way at the tippy top might be trying to ignore it. The rest of us aren't.
Please rise if you currently serve students experiencing food insecurity.
Being class president, I feel like is what kind of pushed me to stand out in a positive way. Be like a positive representative.
Saving was always difficult, so it's not like we had a pot for them for college.
Now that I'm educating myself and I'm learning about food insecurity, I'm learning that this isn't right.
We have to do better than this because it is our moral obligation to do better than this for all these young people who simply want an education, something that this country has always held dear. The thought of giving up always crossed my mind. I don't know if I can make this work anymore. Some days where I was like, is college for me? It would be easier to drop out of college than to be hungry in college. So because people can't fully pay the price of college, they have a very strong likelihood of ending up with nothing except death. It's going to hurt us for generations.
So when the student asks the question, is it worth it? I really found that heartbreaking. I mean, it's heartbreaking that students are struggling in college to find food and housing, but being faced with the choice between eating and paying for school or for books, how did we get here? And if you'll allow me on my soapbox just for a minute, but this really is a result of the significant shift in this country. Higher education was once viewed as a public good. And, you know, it was to create informed, engaged citizens. So we invested in it as a country and as a state, and it's now really shifted to more of a private good. Now the costs rests upon the shoulders of our students and their families. As states have cut higher education, I think we all know it leads to tuition increases. According to a 2020 College Board report, West Virginia has had the second largest percentage increase in tuition in the nation for the past 5 years. I think we're all familiar, our average loan debt for a graduate has increased by about 70% from 2005 to 2017. We heard Chancellor Tucker this morning talk about our college going rate is the lowest in years at around 48%. And now we see the result of that we're faced with these our students are facing these basic needs insecurity. Excuse me. You saw in the video earlier, one of the people profiled is Professor Dr. Sarah Goldrick Rabb, who's done a tremendous amount of research on student needs and security. She's now at Temple University and runs the Hope Center there. So I'd strongly encourage you, if you're not familiar with her work and with the Hope Center, to check out their website, because they have a tremendous amount of resources. And I'll share some of those with you in a little bit. But one of the surveys that they have started is this Real College survey to get a better picture of needs and insecurity across the country. So what does the latest research, they did this survey last spring with over 200,000 students participated, colleges and universities across the country, both 2- and 4-year institutions, and found nearly 3 in 5 students experience some sort of basic needs insecurity. That might be food, housing, homelessness. You see the numbers there. Rates tend to be higher at 2-year community colleges than at 4-year colleges. But I'll share some of our Concord numbers here in a bit, which are more like what nationally our community colleges are facing. There tends to be a big gap too, between Black and white students. Our underrepresented minority students tend to face more of these basic needs insecurity than white students. So you can go on the Hope Center's website and read this full report on the latest Real College survey. So I would encourage you to do that. So just thinking about at your own institution, how you might assess your students' needs if you haven't done so already. We started at Concord in 2015. I used to work in our Academic Success Center, which is a one-stop shop on campus, and really started thinking about this when talking to a student one day who was talking about she and her mother were utilized a local food pantry in the town next door, and she was asking about additional support. And then later that semester, we had a student on campus who was living out of his car in one of our parking lots. And I'd see him sometimes early morning. Our office was outside one of the few 24/7 spaces on campus that had a bathroom, and I'd see him sometimes early morning when I'd get to work early, and finally we had a conversation about what was going on, but it led us to think, okay, there's probably more of this than we see. So we first did a survey. We had a graduate assistant do some research. She found some resources online, and we did just our own homegrown survey on food insecurity. And as a result of that, we started the following year a food pantry on campus. And that initial data really helped us in reaching out to campus constituents and others in the community to get support for that food pantry. This past year, we were part of a grant, and we were able to administer the Hope Center's Real College survey on campus. They also have a great guide. I have the link here on this slide, a great guide to doing your own campus assessment, whether you use their survey or create your own. I encourage you to check that out. But I wanted to show you just some of our numbers at Concord. And it really is important to do your own survey, although I'm sure you have these students on your campus, but it really shows you, if you do your own assessment, the severity of the problem, which populations are especially vulnerable. And one of the things the Real College survey does, it also asks students about how aware they are of the resources on campus and whether or not they utilize them or not. So I'm going to, if you'll bear with me for a moment, share something else rather than my PowerPoint. Let's see. Okay. One second. Okay, I think I figured this out now too. So this is something that we created based on the results of our Real College, our needs assessment. And I also included some of our own Concord data from Banner, some of our financial aid data as well. One of the things we're seeing on campus is as tuition increases and things like the Pell Grant haven't kept pace, that unmet need for students has grown as well. So I've included some of that data on this infographic. But at Concord, we found from our needs assessment that 31% of our students in the past 30 days had experienced food insecurity, that they might not be able to afford balanced meals, they worry about running out of food, or just aren't eating enough each day. I was really surprised by the percentage of students who are also experiencing housing insecurity on campus. And this includes everything from the lack of ability to pay rent, to pay utilities or mortgage, those kinds of things. And as you see, 15% of our students have actually experienced homelessness. And that number was higher than I expected. And we had a really good participation rate on this survey. So I really feel like it's representative of our student population on campus. But homelessness, or the conditions of homelessness, includes things like, couch surfing, not having a place to stay each night, maybe living in a temporary motel or shelter. I know we have a couple state parks nearby. We've had students who have lived at the campground at nearby Pipestem State Park. So with that data, that was incredibly discouraging, and we know we have to continue to do more on campus to help our students. But we also, this survey allowed us to, as I mentioned earlier, to pinpoint which populations might even be more vulnerable. And as you see on this infographic, our LGBTQ and our minority students were the two groups who were most likely to face a basic needs insecurity. So we have plans to do more to try to serve those populations. Two other groups were students who are have children, and of course, not surprisingly, Pell Grant or low-income students. The other eye-opening piece of doing this assessment was we found that a lot of our students hadn't heard of some of our resources on campus. For example, we started an emergency grant program several years ago. And as you see here, almost half of the students surveyed weren't aware of that program. Only a small percentage who had faced needs insecurities had used our emergency grant, had asked for help in obtaining things like SNAP benefits. And it was also helpful because those who used some of our resources, we got a little bit more information on what they were using the funds for, which we keep track of that sort of anyway as students apply for emergency grant funding. But let me see. Let me go back to sharing my PowerPoints. Okay. Sorry, that's not a smooth way to do this. So some of the things we've done to build resources and engage community support at Concord, that infographic I just shared, I went across campus and met with different groups and organizations sharing the data from our needs assessment. And we did that earlier with that 2015 food insecurity survey as well. And that really helped build support for some of these initiatives that you see on this slide. So first, I started with Cabinet. I talked with our Board of Governors, went to a faculty senate and a faculty assembly meeting, met with SGA, talked a lot about it in student affairs, also spoke with some of our alumni about the issue, and have had great support for our food pantry from one of our local alumni groups. So we, as I mentioned before, we started the food pantry, the GAP fund, our emergency grant fund. Just within the last couple of years, we started a professional clothing campus. We've started a textbook library. As you saw in the infographic, one of the things that students talked a lot about was it's difficult paying for textbooks. So not only did we create sort of a free library and ask for donations from students who are graduating or from faculty to donate old textbooks, we've also encouraged faculty to use open educational resources. We have a small scholarship fund to help students buy textbooks as well. So that's something we're looking at to decrease the cost for students of books. A lot of students, that's a sacrifice sometimes they'll make, is not buy their books. One of the things we've especially have found during the pandemic is the students really need a lot of help with computers, laptops. Many are using, I'm sure others have found this on campuses, we're using cell phones to access classes online during the pandemic. So we've purchased some laptops to loan out to students. We've kept one of our computer labs open 24/7 to provide that access. We're fortunate at Concord, we have a daycare on campus to help not only faculty and staff with children, but if students have children, they get can get even free daycare through some state benefits. We've done events like Swipe Out Hunger, which is an event where students can donate a meal swipe to their fellow students. That happened. We did that right before the pandemic hit, so didn't have much opportunity for students to take advantage of it, but we hope to do that again. We really, in student affairs, have made it a priority to focus on helping students with basic needs insecurity, providing resources. So we have sort of a committee that's been working on some of these initiatives and are looking to do more things. One of the great things that we've seen too is both faculty and student groups have really stepped up to help. Some faculty have in class projects, they've done fundraisers, and in marketing classes, they might help us market our food pantry or market a food drive for us. Our SGA a few years ago, as part of the homecoming competition, included food donations to the food pantry. So we got hundreds and hundreds of packets of ramen noodle and soup as part of the homecoming competition among the Greek organizations. So I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about, I'm going to stop sharing and see if folks would like to share some of the things you're doing on your campus, or some of the things you're seeing that students are struggling with. Anything in the chat or questions yet?
There is not. I think everybody has been listening. And so now this is the time to participate and to see if you have any questions or any thoughts. As people are thinking, I actually had one question. Somebody said, Deborah said that she sees many students struggling with transportation.
Yes, we've had a lot of students apply for our GAP fund asking for gas money, or or even, you know, if their car breaks down, they might not be able to come to campus and can't afford the $200 or $300 for a car repair. So we see that as well. The challenging thing is, I know I struggle with, we want students to be aware of the resources, but admittedly, there's so much need that I think our emergency grant fund would be overwhelmed too. I know it's just a constant struggle to meet the need financially for our students. And I see a question, someone says, if students can't afford food, why do colleges continue raising tuition? And I'd go back to my earlier soapbox speech about that. I think it doesn't necessarily rely only at the fault of colleges, that we need to, in this country and state, support higher education more. Typically, when states need to cut budgets, higher ed is the first to be cut. And what that leads to is then they are forced to increase tuition. Here's another question that this is will lead me. This is a good transition. So it talks about, Sarah asked, have you experienced any stigma on campus associated with assistance program like this? If so, how do you handle it? I definitely think that's an issue. One of the things we're trying to do is sort of let students know it's okay to ask for help. I'm going to pull up my slide presentation again and show you a few of the things we're doing. Okay, so one of the things we've worked with someone to help us create some videos of students talking about belonging on campus, some of the things they experience on campus, who they go to for help. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit of one of these videos from one of our Concord students. Let's see.
I'm first generation. So a lot of the, like Pell Grant, obviously everyone applies for that on my FAFSA. That helped me tremendously. But then I was still struggling like with just simple things like, you know, food, like glasses breaks. I had a job, so I still needed the gas and different things like that. So I've worked ever since my second semester of my freshman year through college. And people always say like, oh, you should be a full-time student, but that's not an option for everyone. And being that I'm a leader, like with students of color, like a lot of men on our campus that are of color, they struggle a lot and they don't say anything about it. And a lot of them are out-of-state students and they don't have the support from their families, not because they don't want to, but because either they don't want to ask or they know their family doesn't have the financial extra to send them. And I'd say, like, even though this isn't money, when you do get to your campus, find out if they have a pantry. Find out if they have different types of, like the CARES Act and different things, because colleges have money to help students who are struggling in that way. I mean, I didn't know half of the things that they can offer you. I mean, there's ways that they can give you a stipend for food. There's ways that they can give you a stipend for clothes. So even though that's not your tuition and room and board, when you get there and you feel like you're struggling and being in Athens, like, it's not like you can just get on the bus and go to work. There is a bus, but it runs so weird. A lot of the students that come to Concord that are from out of state, they're used to public transportation. We don't have that. Like, we don't have Uber, we don't have Lyft, we don't have things like that. So when you get to your campus, even if you have $1 million in your pocket, find out what's free on campus and how you can get it.
So that's what we're trying to, you know, have students hear from their peers that it's okay to ask for help. We have these resources on campus, and hopefully that hearing from their peers will help destigmatize some of the services. One of our next steps too is to really expand our partnerships and resources. I know, again, I'm referring back to Chancellor Tucker's, and she was talking some of the community colleges are piloting the wraparound services and working with DHHR, and that's our next step too. We would like to help students get connected. I saw Dr. Pursley's comment that some of the SNAP benefits might mean, or some of the new guidelines, or that students might more easily be eligible for things like SNAP benefits. There's other resources out there in terms of getting help with emergency aid for you paying utilities, helping students with Medicaid. So that's one of our next steps that we'd like to do here on campus. Expand some of those external partnerships and again, help destigmatize the use of some of those benefits. One of the other things that we're doing is, and this is a recommendation from the Hope Center, is to include on syllabi a care statement that talks about it's okay. You know, a lot of students may struggle with food, housing. It's okay. We have resources. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to come to me as if you have a statement on your syllabus. Faculty encourage students to come to them for help, or to someone in student affairs. So that's something we're starting this fall, encouraging faculty to include a statement like that. We're also going to include in our Blackboard, our learning management system, in those shells, we hope to include a list of all the resources like our food pantry, our GAP fund, those kinds of things. So students will have it every time they go into Blackboard for a class, they'll have access to those resources. Let's see. To my knowledge, I see Dr. Pursley's question about SNAP benefits. To my knowledge, I am not sure how many of our students have taken advantage of those benefits yet. And again, that's a next step that we want to see more of our students, and we want to help. And I think we need to do a better job on campus letting them know that they likely would be eligible, because many of our students qualify for work study, and even probably qualified for SNAP even prior to those changes because they were working almost full time. And I'm sorry if I'm trying to keep up with questions. I appreciate people's patience in a virtual setting like this.
Please let me know if you want me to read them or if you prefer to go over them directly, however you would prefer to do it.
Okay, I'm just going through, but really our next steps, I've talked some about our next steps at Concord. We'd also like to expand the resources we have on campus. Again, I think our GAP fund could never be large enough to cover the need, but we'd like to do some more fundraising for that emergency grant fund. I'm really excited that HEPC is working on an emergency grant fund for our students across the state too. That will be a huge help to campuses and students. But are there any other questions? Can folks talk a little bit more about whether you, in the chat, some of the things that you're doing on your campus that might be unique? I see Lewis from Shepherd has mentioned that on his campus there's more signage about their food pantry. We've tried to do that as well, so students are aware. We also started, so our food pantry is in our building that houses our business department, and we've also started sort of another place on campus, almost like a second food pantry, because students don't always like to go down the hill to that building. So we've started a second location. We also did things like during our career week this spring, we brought a lot of our clothes from our clothing closet to one of our big our Subway restaurant area on campus, and we have a little stage and had a lot of students. Each day we're taking clothing that we had set up during career week. Have you found using the data around retention to be helpful in raising funds for your emergency fund? Somewhat. Again, the kinds of data that I have found to be more powerful are what I shared earlier in that infographic. And we do look at retention sort of by different student characteristics. And one of the things that we're finding too is that the gap between our low income or our Pell and non-Pell students, that gap is growing, which is really tough to see because for many years at Concord, our Pell students tended to do as well as our non-Pell students in being retained. But that gap is growing, and we found too that students with, not surprisingly, students with higher unmet financial need are more likely to drop out. So we do use that some in raising funds. It really helped us secure some money for a retention scholarship that we started a few years ago. And we found that students who are getting the retention scholarships, $2,000 annual scholarships, are being retained at much higher rates because we're able to lower their unmet need. I'm looking at some of the other ideas folks are sharing. So I know others can read the comments, but I would be curious to learn more about Blue Ridge's pilot program called Ascend, which offers incentives. And it sounds like Marshall does something like the Swipe Out Hunger event, donating unused meals. Yes, yeah. So yeah, I would love to hear more about Blue Ridge's pilot program. I might reach out to you, Amanda. Well, that's all I have in terms of presentation. This, I have to admit, is one of my first conference presentations virtually. I've sat through other virtual presentations, but I do miss the give and take in a real live environment. So I'm hoping next year we'll all be together again, but I know you all do a lot of great work on your campuses, and I'm happy to talk to folks more. Just reach out and we can share ideas. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beasley. We really, truly appreciate your session today. Jennifer had to hop off because of a technical issue, so we just wanted to say a big thanks for your session and appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing everyone in the next session.
Thanks, Carolyn. Bye.